What's happening, hobby people? Welcome to what's supposed to be episode 4 of the Dry Paint Pot Holiday Special. Now, the reason why this is coming out so late is because I got wiped out. Just to be totally honest, I got exhausted. You see, I was prepping everything for Christmas, and because of that, my videos were struggling. I found myself rushing, and I was painting well into the night. I mean, it was like 2:30 in the morning, and I'm like finishing recording, and it was just a disaster. Yeah. So I decided to take a week and a half off to celebrate Christmas, take a little break, and then the New Year. So this video is definitely late, so I apologize for that. But I decided to do things a little bit differently. Instead of doing a skit this week, I'd rather talk to you and just share some things that are going to go on with the channel during 2021, and also just say thank you to all of you. So first things first, I just want to share something with you. I started this channel in the midst of quarantine. It was crazy, everything was locked down, and I needed something to distract myself. And I'm so passionate about miniature painting that I decided to share a few things that I've learned over the years. Now, if you check out any of my old videos, you could see how disastrous they are, and that's because I'm not used to being in front of a camera. I mean, I don't think anyone really is. And while I was nervous and some of my videos didn't turn out too great, I still had a blast, and I've learned so much, and I've gotten a lot more comfortable making these videos, and because of that, I can make them better and better each week, and it's been awesome. And besides that, while I've been making these videos, I've also gained over 1,000 followers on Instagram, and I've met so many awesome people on there, so many people that I can now call my friends. While that was going on, I also started my Discord and made a bunch of other friends. So while 2020 was it was an awful year. And while it was so secluded, while we were stuck inside, I actually made more friends inside than I did on my day-to-day, when the world was open. So what I'm trying to say is that 2020 sucked, but I want to thank you all so very much, because while this didn't make it good, because it wasn't a good year, you guys helped make it tolerable. So I just want to thank you all for all of your love and support, and for getting me through this whole quarantine situation and making it just that much easier. And also a very early thank you to my patrons, because it's your support that helps me get new supplies and replenish paint and just keep up with this expensive hobby. Okay, so now let's get into the meat and potatoes of this all. So 2021 is going to be a little different for this channel. Now don't worry, I'm still making videos, but this is what's going on. So I've recently interviewed for a few different jobs, and I'm crossing my fingers to hopefully get one of them. Now what that means is I am going to be a little more busy, but I'm not going to let that hold me back from making these videos, because no matter what I'm doing, this channel and my Instagram is always going to be number one to me. I'm not quitting the hobby just because I'm going to get a little busy. So I'm going to have to work around my new schedule a little bit, but that's definitely going to slow me down a little bit. Also, I've really enjoyed making these skits at the beginning of my videos, and I've enjoyed doing a few more things and making the videos a little more technical, I guess, adding some different effects, doing some voiceovers. So with that, it takes a lot more time to do those things, and I'm starting to find myself rushing through my videos. I'm getting bogged down, I'm getting tired, and I'm working very late on these things, and I wish I just had more time. So to make more time, I've decided to switch my schedule up a little bit. So videos will no longer be coming out on a weekly basis. They're going to be coming out on a bi-weekly basis. Now this will give me one extra week to put more time into the video to paint bigger things, because when I'm making these videos and I only have a week, I have to paint whatever I'm working on within roughly a day or two. And that becomes very stressful, and I find myself cutting corners when I really want to show you how to paint things better. I want to do a better job before you and give you better content. So by adding this extra week onto my schedule, I'll be able to paint bigger things, show you more complicated techniques, and we can really bring this channel to the next level. And just like before, these videos will still come out on Saturdays for patrons and Sundays for everyone else. So I hope you're not disappointed, but I promise you that this extra week is going to make things so much better. Now this week, we're going to be taking a look at Gorilla Grodd from the Batman Miniatures game. I'm not the biggest fan of Batman. I know some of you are probably going to unsubscribe and hate me. I think Batman's cool, but I'm not like a big die-hard Batman fan. But I love gorillas. I love gorillas, orangutans, chimps. I love the Planet of the Apes. So I originally bought this model because, what was the company? Was it WYSIWYG Games, I think? I'm pretty sure it was WYSIWYG Games. They were going to come out with this Planet of the Apes tabletop game. I was so pumped for it. But the thing was, like, they were taking forever to put out, like, even just the earliest version of their game. It was like a big Kickstarter. And they said they were going to come out with the rules and give it out to the backers. So I thought, okay, if I get Gorilla Grodd and his crew, and I get these rules, and I already have Space Marines, I have bolters, I can kind of do this, like, human versus apes thing, and kind of play, like, a little version of the game. So I picked up Gorilla Grodd, and I thought I would just get some, like, 3D printed extra models so I can really make a team. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and then it fell through. Later on, they tried to reboot it, but that fell through again. So now I had Gorilla Grodd, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just get into the Batman game. I grabbed some extra models, and then everyone I knew who was playing the game left the store that I was playing at. Long story short, I never got around to it. But I've had Gorilla Grodd. He's a really awesome looking model, so I figured it's about time to bust him out and really give him the proper treatment that he deserves. So Gorilla Grodd, as I've mentioned, is part of the Batman Minis game, and that's made by Night Models. They're a company out of Spain, and they're known for their metal and resin models. And Gorilla Grodd is made of resin, which I can't stand. I hate working with resin, but I'll make an exception because it's Gorilla Grodd. Now, once I actually play this game, I'll give you my opinions on it and talk about it a little more. So cross your fingers. Hopefully this whole pandemic situation cools down a little bit. I can find a local group that plays it, and then maybe I'll make a video on my first playthrough, but we'll see. So without further ado, let's not waste any more time and jump right into things. As you can already tell, I went ahead and did a few things ahead of time to prep this model. I started out by priming the model gray and then going over all of the skin and fur with Abaddon black. Keeping the cape gray will make it easier to later paint red. Also, I've had a bit more luck painting metallics over gray rather than black. The darker base coats always want to bleed through the metallic layers. Now for the base, I threw down a layer of Sterling mud ahead of time, because I don't like adding technicals to the bases last. I always end up getting some on the model, so it's easier just to prep the base ahead of time and paint over any parts that got on the model. I planned on dry brushing the fur, and since that can sometimes be messy, I decided to do that first. I went for a mix of Celestra Gray and Abaddon Black. I just load up my brush, take a majority of the paint off my brush with some paper towel, and dry brush all of the places with fur. Once the dry brushing was done, I washed all of the fur with Nuln Oil. With the fur being so bright, you can go heavy with the wash, it's no big deal. I painted my very first gorilla a few years back, and I made one big mistake. I painted it using mostly different shades of gray, black, and white, and without any warm tones, the model looked a bit dull and washed out. To make sure that I didn't make the same mistake again, I mixed Mechanicus Standard Gray and Steel Legion Drab to make a nice warm gray skin tone. I used this mix on all of the skin, so that's the chest, the hands, the feet, face, and back. After 2 or so thin layers, I gave all of the skin a good wash in Nuln Oil. We don't want to go too heavy on the wash here, we just want it to seep into all of the recesses on the chest to make the muscles pop. While the wash was drying, I decided to start working on the cape. I painted this separately because it has some hard to reach places and doesn't allow much space to paint the back of the model. So I didn't have to touch this and risk messing up the layers. I drilled a small hole into the bit that later gets glued into the model. I then glued the end of an old brush into the hole and made a handle. Now you can do the same thing with wooden skewers or toothpicks, but this old brush is what I had laying around, so it just had to work. I wanted a deep red for the cape, so I decided on a base coat of corn red. To keep layers smooth, I thinned my paint down, and because of this, I ended up having to use 3 thin layers. Allowing the cape time to dry, I bounced back over to Grodd for some skin highlights. The parts of the model that need to be focused on for this step are the pecs, stomach, abs, and face. To create a smooth transition, I started this process off by going over these areas with the original mix of Mechanicus Standard Gray and Steel Legion Drab. When painting the abs, be sure not to paint over the creases between each muscle. We want these areas to hold the wash and stay dark to really accentuate the muscles. For a brighter highlight, I added some Screaming Skull to the mix and only highlighted from the edge of the muscles closest to the sternum to about the center of the muscle. Now for an extreme highlight, I added some White Scar to the mix and traced the muscle with a very thin layer. I noticed that these sharp and boxy highlights don't always look so natural, so I did a bit of stippling over the highlight and it all sort of blended together pretty well. Alright, so I'm in my underwear right now, and you could probably hear my washing machine going because I went to shake this pot of paint. I didn't know that it was cracked open, and paint went literally everywhere. Like everywhere on my desk, off my desk, on the wall. Yeah, it's just everywhere. So I'm gonna need a minute. Now the cape is by far the most difficult part of this model to paint. I kept second guessing where the shadows should go, and it took forever to blend everything just right. Now to find the shadows, I positioned the cape under my lamp and took note of where a majority of the light would catch and the places that were naturally darker. If you have a camera sitting around, you could always take a picture of this as a reference. So to start things off, I mixed Evil Sun Scarlet with some Corn Red and, with very thin layers, covered any raised creases of the cape. For the next few layers, I just keep adding more and more Evil Sun Scarlet to the mix, and I bring my layers closer to the center of the creases. After doing some glazing, I then did a bit of washing to darken the recesses and bring my blends all together. And for this, I used Seraphim Sepia and went fairly light with it. To break up the hard line between the bright and dark red, I even did a bit of dry brushing. And once that was complete, I glazed another layer or two, and I was done. If you like an in-depth tutorial on glazing, just let me know in the comment section, and I'll get to it as soon as I can. Painting Grodd's loincloth was like the cape, but 100 times easier. I first started with the base coat of Corn Red, and after a good base coat was complete, I jumped straight to the Evil Sun Scarlet, and with very thin layers, I just painted any raised and rippled parts of the cloth. That's it. That's all you have to worry about. Gorilla Grodd has these lightning bolts on his chest, so to get them just right, I looked at a reference photo and used a pencil to make some markings of where everything should go. And using Evil Sun Scarlet, I painted the 3 bolts with a very fine tipped brush. Once the bolts were complete, I outlined them with Corn Red. Now the outline is very important because it makes the shape of the lightning bolt bold and prominent. Now this step is probably the easiest one. I just wanted the leather straps to be very simple, so I painted them with Steel Legion Drab. That's it. Now at this point, I was looking at the model thinking something wasn't right. Although everything was being painted, it didn't feel like it was all coming together. And I soon realized that Grodd's hair was causing the problem. You see, everything on this model reacts to a light source. The leather straps will have a highlight, the cloth has a highlight, but the body is all the same. It's dry brushed gray over black. The hair or fur, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't react to the light. It's all the same on the entirety of the body. Now I needed a quick fix that wouldn't mess up the other parts of this model that were already painted, so I watered down some of the color that was used as the base coat for the skin and applied a bit on the thighs, biceps, head, and anywhere that light catches. After that, I dry brushed those areas again with some Celestia Gray and washed them with Nuln Oil. So now the areas of the model that should have shadow, like under the arms and between the legs, are based with Abaddon Black and highlighted with Celestia Gray, whereas the areas that should catch light, like the top of the head and the biceps, are based with dark gray and highlighted with Celestia Gray. This quick step immediately fixed the model, and I was ready to paint his mouth. For the tongue, I went for a deeper and darker pink. You can usually catch me using pink horror on mouths, but this time I decided on Tuskor fur. I just painted the tongue with this color and left the rest of the mouth black. and any tusker fur that spilt over was quickly touched up once I washed everything in Nuln Oil. Now the teeth were also extremely easy. I gave them 2 layers of white scar and they were done. Gorilla Grodd is known for his red eyes, so for this I used Evil Sun Scarlet. To really show his power and bring things to the next level, I watered down my red and lightly glazed around his eye and on the eyebrow. This gave a glowing effect and turned out pretty good. And rather than painting a pupil, I mixed Evil Sun Scarlet and Uriel Yellow to get a very bright orange, and with very thin layers, glazed toward the center of the eye. This created a smooth transition from the red to orange and ensured that no defined pupil was made. If you've seen any of my other videos, then you know how much I love Vallejo alcohol-based metallic paints. And if you want to see how I use these paints, then I'll throw a link to an old tutorial up top. So as to not make the armor look so flat and boring, I decided on using 2 different colored golds. I used old gold on the center of the shoulder pads and belt, and green gold on the edges of the shoulder pad and headpiece. I then used silver on the horn, and I was done with the metallics. It was next time to wash the metallics. So old gold is a very warm color, so I washed the belt and shoulder pads with Agrax Earthshade. Green gold is not as warm, so the headpiece and horn were washed in Nuln Oil. If you're following along at home, all you need to do now is attach the cape to the body. So to do this and ensure that it holds tight, I put a bit of green stuff into the back slot. Once it was fitting in, I applied a bit of glue, held the cape in place for a few seconds, and the cape was all set. All you have to do now is base the model to match the theme of your army, and it's all complete. A massive shout out to my patrons, Leandrist, Che Phillip, The Dark Path, Came From The Moon, and $2 Sucky Sucky. Thank you all so very much for your support, and if you'd also like to help support the channel, I'll drop a link to my Patreon down low, and if you want to just hang out, talk about the hobby, you guys already know it. There's a link to my Discord down low too. Now be sure to tag any of your posts on Instagram or Facebook with the hashtag #TheDryPaintPot, because I pick my favorites each week and I feature them in my upcoming videos. Now wash your brushes, clean your paint pots, and keep on painting.